Hello and welcome to our podcast. I'm Dani, and today Great.com has three very special guests. We're talking with Elias Vasquez, the legal case manager, Star Ameraso on the communications team, and Andrea Gatesrelay, the re-entry case management of Miss Major Alexander L. Lee Black TGIJP Black Transcultural Center. If you haven't heard of them yet, their mission is to challenge and end the human rights abuses committed against Black and Brown trans people inside of California prisons, jails, detention centers, and beyond. Before we begin, as always, remember if you're new here to this podcast, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. Hi, three of you. It's amazing to have three people here to talk to us today. And welcome, Elias. Welcome, Star, and welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure, really is a pleasure to talk to you. And I mentioned before, I will always give listeners in the audience a bit of what goes on the backstage here. I mentioned that we did not talk enough, I believe, about these intersections that we're going to talk today, right? Talking about Black lives, talking about trans lives, and we're talking about LGBT QI community in prison. Those are very, very important points for us to address. And as the podcast, right, we also have been blindsided to this if you think about it. So let's give this a very, very important moment for us in this conversation. Let's begin, Elias, learning more about the organization, right? We know that the name has changed recently, but how did things begin and what inspired the creation of the organization? And above all, how have you guys evolved to address these needs?
Yeah, so it actually started as a fellowship with a trans law student named Alexander Lee, who is now a part of the name change. It started as a fellowship that he received because he was doing research and finding that Black trans women specifically were being harmed by the prison industrial complex. And the fellowship was mainly to give legal resources and legal aid to TGI people in locked facilities and specifically Black trans women. And it started with like mail nights. They would do correspondence to people inside, just making sure people had that they knew that they had community out here caring for them, willing to hear their voices, willing to hear their stories. And they were just it was every Tuesday they would do a mail night, and it was just continuing contact and then sending love inside, and also like giving legal cases for references for self-advocacy on the inside, giving them stamps, giving them postages, the things that they needed to do their own self-advocacy against everything that they're facing inside. And then as well as doing legal visits. Legal visits was a large part of what we did because it just showed staff that people had eyes watching, and that way there was less harm on folks inside whenever people realized that they were watching. So they would just go in, check in with them, and it just grew. And one of the things that Alex Lee was very foundational was interesting in Black trans leadership. And so he called in Miss Major, who is a community leader, and I she became the first executive director of the org. And since then, we've been providing legal support as well of it. Now we have wellness, reentry, comms. The departments have just grown. We have our now name change to reflect the leadership, Miss Major Alexander L. Lee, and now we are considered a Black Trans Cultural Center. So it's more than just legal support. It is like a holistic care model overall to just support Black trans women and all trans people of color and beyond. And it just really provides like a home and a space for it. I think that's also why the name change, the cultural center specifically, just highlights that it is more than just like a nonprofit org. It's really just like a home and a center and a space for our community to come to get food, to get help, to get wellness, any services that they need that they can't really find elsewhere, especially in the city. Yeah, they come here, and now we have also expanded. It started as a in California, in California locked facilities, but now um, under our new CEO, Miss Janetta Johnson, she's originally from Florida, so they have their advocacies in Florida as well. Y'all want to talk a little about that?
That's good. That was a great answer.
Yeah, I loved it, and it's actually beautiful to see how things have grown in this way, right? Not just providing more legal assistance, but also creating this cultural space, like being really a community. I feel, and this could be a misconception on my part, but I feel like one of the greatest challenges of uh, people in this situation are loneliness, right? And not being really able to feel like they are part of something, that they have this support net, that they can rely on others to go through life. And actually, this leads me to another question that maybe start you could join, you can jump into this to understand better, how do you navigate these challenges, right? Because one, there are the challenges that people face, but also there are the challenges that the advocacy work also faces, right? So how do you navigate the challenges of advocating for TGI rights in a system that quite often overlooks or even marginalizes these communities?
Yeah, I think as an organization, we really focus on grassroots approaches. So we have Melanie Eleneke Grassroots Reentry Socioeconomic Justice Program for folks who are coming out of prisons and for people who are needing access to jobs. Because it's one thing to get somebody out, and it's one thing to have people, but like, what are we going to do after that? It's give people access to housing, give people access to jobs. And I think making sure we really take care of people all the way around is really important. And I feel like some of the challenges that we as trans people face in America right now, there's hundreds of bills that are introduced all around the states targeting trans people and queer people. And so we're in a place that's technically a sanctuary city, but we have such a huge population of people that is homeless. And so we're addressing some of the issues of why are people homeless and why are they not accessing services? And so we're trying to be a place where we can sort of get in the way and stop people from living on the streets, from not having access to food, and for not having access to jobs. I think in our society, trans people can be discriminated against often. And so this is really important that we are a place where people can feel like they can be themselves as well as have opportunities for growth. I think all three of us have recently just like gotten promotions in the past 6 months. And that's something that's really important at this organization is that we are trans people helping and supporting other trans people. And I think it's something that the world needs to see.
Absolutely. I think it all goes back to that sentence of nothing about us without us, right?
Exactly.
It needs to be that way. You cannot grow anywhere without people facing these challenges, really in charge of the decisions. So it absolutely makes no sense. I believe to really understand the barriers, how your work is impacting lives, we can break this conversation in two aspects, right? One is understanding better these barriers, maybe the key legal and systemic barriers that you are working to dismantle. And then maybe inside of this question, uh, besides these barriers, maybe for you, Elias, how can the public support your efforts? So two questions here. One is, I'm going to do this whole thing again. Sorry. Yeah, let's do it. Uh, now, I believe to fully understand the extent of your work, and the impact that it has, we might need to look at it into two perspectives. One is to trying to understand the difficulties and the barriers that appears, and another one that is understanding really the impact that it has on people's lives. Looking at this first block, I'm going to ask this to you, Elias. What are the barriers, the key legal and systemic barriers that you are working to dismantle, and how can the public support these efforts?
Our main like abolition is rooted in within our org's mission statement. So I feel like abolition-based practices and just abolishing the prison industrial complex is our main like target goal right now. And in to be doing it in a place like California where our prisons are closing already is just a powerful spot to be in. But just in terms of showing even through our reentry program how um crime doesn't have to be incarceration isn't just the only way to solve crime or to treat crime, however you want say it. But in just terms of the abolition and just ending forced prison labor and kind of creating a world where you meet the individual's needs, like we were saying with the reentry program, in the sense of having making sure they have housing, they have um, employment, kind of the things that once you take away from somebody, it just that's what really causes crime, and moving past the fear of crime.
Right. So people do things, correct? And then we live in this world where somebody does something that people don't like, and then they're locked up and put into jails and sometimes forced to work for no pay. And we're looking at transformative justice approaches. So when we talk about abolition, abolition means ending forced labor, ending people being in prisons, and abolition originally started with freeing of slaves because originally in the United States, the majority of people who were in prison first were white people. And then after the abolition and the ending of slavery, the majority of people, almost 300 times, became people of color and Black people specifically who were freed slaves and then became a workforce for America. So we're working towards really understanding the root cause of the problems, which is the fact that we don't have enough food for people, we don't have enough housing, and this is causing people to commit crimes. And then we are being extremely tough on these people and not giving them any sort of rehabilitation or any sort of accountability processes that don't involve locking them up. And so our goal is to end that completely and free all people and work towards a transformative justice approach.
So I really appreciate you bringing this example to us.
And,
I
you know, for example, there was a moment that happened to me when I was in high school. I remember it very vividly. I was 16, and where I lived in Austin, Texas, you had to be seven. If you were 17, you could leave school during lunch. So I was 16. And I was a student that had all good grades. I went to school every day. I didn't skip school. On my lunch break, I went to the grocery store and got some food with a friend, and I got picked up by the police and put in the back of a police car just for simply not being on school campus for my hour during lunch. And it's things like that where the police officer was wanting to give me a ticket, and those kind of things start to add up, right? You start getting one ticket, another ticket, and then suddenly you go from school to prison. And it's just that simple. And because I was a different type of student in their mind, they're like, okay, you can do community service hours to get rid of this. And so I literally had to go and do community service hours, all for simply leaving the school property and going to get food outside of the school. So it's things like that that sort of set up people in certain communities to be in locked facilities. So that was just an example of how innocuous we can think it is and how small it can start.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your story, Star. Absolutely. Thank you. And Elias, I want to just go back to one thing that you mentioned, that is the reentry program, right? And I'm going to use this to talk about the second block that I said to understand your work, that is knowing more about the impact that it has in people's lives. And then bring Andrea to the conversation. Because as someone working in this part of the organization, right, in this reentry case management role, you might be closer to the stories. You might be closer to people really passing through it, right? Getting out and understand and coming back to I'm sorry, I rambled, guys. I apologize for it.
Okay, right?
Yeah,
You're
you're on.
good.
Yeah,
You're on it.
you're on it.
No, I'm gonna do over. Um, Elias, I want to go back to something that you said, that is the reentry program, because as I said, I think there are two sides to look at the work that you guys are doing. One is understanding the barriers, and the second one that I want to address now, knowing more about the impact that it has on people's lives, and then bringing Andrea to the conversation as someone working with the reentry part of the programs. You might have a closer look to people in this situation. So could you share maybe some story of how the organization has positively impacted the life of someone within the TGI community, particularly within the prison system?
Yeah, so actually, just a background too. Within a large part of the reentry model is giving people jobs and access to jobs. So Andrea is actually a graduate of that program, but has now been a full-time now in a reentry case manager role, supporting the same people. So what we do is, in terms of advocacy, is a large part of my role is doing a lot of correspondence with judges in courts and making sure that, and with public defenders as well, just kind of being a tap in point of like public defenders contact our org and let them know that our community is in there, that they need our support. We write advocacy letters to the judges, letting them know that we have a whole organization that is behind these people. We are willing to give them housing, help them with their going to court hearings, because a lot of times, a lot of people don't realize that transportation is a huge issue on going to court hearings, and also just that fear of being in a courthouse, being in and a lot of it brings up a lot of trauma and PTSD within people that just make them not show up to their court dates, and they don't realize how that can then lead to a warrant, that can then lead to this whole ripple effect, and then become this larger issue. So what we try to do is, especially, is offer a lot of court support. So that's what I did in my role. Pre- um, was just going with clients to their court hearings, being able to hear what the judge tells them and explain it to them in a way that's like more easier to understand, kind of breaking down the legalese language of it all, because I think that's a huge barrier within itself, is the fact that a lot of people don't even really understand the court proceedings that are happening, and this is affecting their entire lives. It's like there's this specific language that they use, and unless you're a lawyer or unless you're well versed in legal language, you can't really like it's hard to follow what's being said up there. So a lot of times the clients would just be like, what just happened, or what did they just say? And it's just breaking that down, like this is what this means. This is specific legal terms that they were talking about. And also being there to push and advocate for clients. Like we have a lot. So I work with the reentry clients, and specifically one of ours, Candy, who we went to her court hearings, and it's just there was a public defender who was trying to get a deal, and it was like they were trying to give 120 days incarceration. Um, and we were just basically we had a advocacy letter ready saying that we would help support with housing, we would help support meet all the needs, we would make sure that she showed up to her court hearings, and I was on pressing the public defender to like we were not accepting incarceration as that's a form of punishment. And so she went in there back and she was like, okay, well, I'll see what I can get the DA to drop it down to or whatever. And it took us like back and forth, like having to be like, no, we're not accepting this. No, we're not. Cause I think it's so easy to just slap a plea deal on people and just be like, oh, you can take this. And they don't realize how much. And so then she came back with another deal of a GPS monitoring system. And with that comes lots of costs. It's like $100, like $200 just to get on. And with that, it's like you're setting them up again, because a lot of people don't have the means and funding to pay for these surveillance systems that the courts are using to, okay, maybe you're not in a confined box, but we're still surveilling you, and we're still keeping track of you, and you're still under our direct control. So it's just our main goal is to be that block right there between the system's control and their surveillance, and bringing our family into our care and providing them. And that just starts with communicating to the judges to be like, this is an alternative to the GPS monitoring or to incarceration. So in that specific instance, she was released directly into TGIJP's care, and we are providing her with the resources that she needs, continuing to do progress updates with her court hearings, and just kind of help her manage it. Now she's working at the front desk. She's just seeing how her life is just like she sees hope and she sees like support and community and love. And just like it was really like a beautiful eye-opening experience to just be with her along the whole process of it, from the court hearing to now, to seeing how she comes in the morning, she brings like candy for her candy jar, just like happy to be at work, happy to have a job. Like it's just it was so beautiful. And like sharing little moments with her when she's just like she's like, oh, like, just truly, it's just a beautiful experience to just see it full round circle. And that's what can happen when you give people access to what they need versus being caught in a carceral system. And that's what we do that's the reentry's model, is taking them from that and putting us into our care, and then giving them money, giving them a job, giving them employment, giving them things to be held accountable for, and love and support and encouragement through it. Because a lot of us, we just needed love, we just needed guidance, support, and you can't get that in a carceral system. It's not based on retributive justice. You know what they say, it's not. That's not how it works inside. Like, it's just a cell. And
It's always a good thing to be able to advocate for individuals who do not have the means to advocate for self. And those are the individuals who are incarcerated. I think in a conversation, we tend to forget about individuals in the state prison system. And those are two, you got county jails and you have state penitentiaries. And, those individuals who are actually in prison, they have already gone through the justice system. They've been sentenced to a certain amount of time, whether it's determinate or indeterminate, but they've been sentenced to state prison. And those individuals have a hard time because once you go to the prison system, there are no more public defenders. There are no more court supports, and you're pretty much you're thrown in a dungeon. And we tend to forget about those people. And these are the people that that I feel as well need, the support from, or need to know that there's support out here awaiting them whenever their time comes for, release. It's kind of hard to advocate for individuals who are incarcerated in the prison system if their cases are not in the court, meaning that if they haven't fallen up under a Senate bill or Assembly bill that has passed, that basically gives them the opportunity to get back into the court system, get before a judge and probably get retried or resentenced. The only way I feel that we are able to get to those individuals and provide them with that information is that we need to be knocking on the door of the state departments, you know what I mean? The governor's office, the California Department of Corrections, their front doors. We need to be knocking on their doors and let them know, like, hey, we have information, and the information that we have is the information that you guys are not allowing to come into these institutions, to provide the help for these individuals who are actually looking for their help. For instance, I was incarcerated in state prison, and one of the challenges that I faced, upon my entering into the prison system was not having the access to support services for trans people, and especially trans people of color. That information was not there, and how a lot of it was advertised prior, or I think what it was they limited the amount of information that came into the institution. So if it had anything to do with legal, which they cannot bar, that was the information they would allow to come in. But information as far as support groups, it's like they limited, they wouldn't let that information get in there. So me personally, I worked in a law library, and working in a law library, we had a transgender resource binder. And in this binder, the binder was about this thick, the actual binder was, right? But there was actually nothing in the binder. Now, this is just the thickness of the binder. So this is the back end of that binder. and that binder folds in. There was actually nothing in there, a couple sheets of paper. And the sheets of paper that were actually in this binder were just specifically information about Senate Bill 132. Other than that, there were no support, information for the transgender population upon, those people who are actually looking for resources in preparation of getting out of prison. Now, there was a separate binder, and several other binders that accompanied this binder for so many different counties in this state here that specifically had resources for cis men and cis women who are actually incarcerated. So there was no information available to the trans population there. And then when it's time to come, when it's time to come out and get out of prison, you don't have those resources, and you're trying to figure out what your next move is going to be. And if you don't have that drive, or if you don't have that drive or motivation to get out there and go, put forth the work and get out there and go seek out, resources or whatever, you're gonna find I've seen it happen multiple times. I can speak for self because I was in that position too. You know what I'm saying? The incarceral state has been basically a part of my life since the age of 12. And 1992 was the first time I was incarcerated. And I was incarcerated for a total of 11 months as a juvenile. That was 1992 at the age of 12. And then it just continued to go. Once I got in the system at a young age, there was no way to get out the system. And here I am, 44 years old, for the first time in my life. And I share this with as a reminder to my parents. I'm like, yo, I've been on probation and parole my entire life. My entire life, I've been on probation and parole. And for the first time as of this year, when I was released from prison, I discharged a number. I had a number since the age of 12. And there was no way to shake this number once I got into the system. But that's the story of the majority of the people who are incarcerated in the prison system here in California. Their journey started way when they were young, in their adolescent years. And then we get into the system, and then when there's no resources available, we get comfortable, with stealing from the store or robbing someone because it became easier. It was easier. It was easier than going into an establishment and filling out an application and not having educational backing. It was easier when going in there and looking the way that I look. I'm looking the way that I look, and most people are not going to be accepting to that. Times have changed, yes. And some people are opening more doors. Yes, thank God. But it was not like that 10, 15 years ago. It was very difficult to get employment. So for me, I'm grateful for TGIJP and the opportunity to get out and to step into these entry-level positions. You know what I mean? And to go through this training and then move into these positions. You know what I'm saying? I'm very grateful for that. And those are the messages that I want to be able to get out to people who are in the prison system. It's always a good thing to be able to advocate for individuals who are in jail, and with these, going through through the process. But we tend to forget about those individuals who are in these prisons, in these cells, you know what I mean? And what they do is they give us TVs and tennis shoes and clothes and food sales and this and this and this and this and jobs where we're making money and stuff, so we can be complacent or comfortable in that environment to where we'll do whatever we need to do, the fear. Let me rephrase that. The fear of getting out of prison is so high. So then what we do is we find ourselves becoming comfortable in that environment. And it's like, you know what? There's no resources. There's no nothing. If I go back out there, I'm going to wind up back in here anyway. So shoot, I'm just going to get comfortable in this situation. It sucks. It really, really sucks. But I'm just grateful to be here and to be able to, I'm come from that background. I come from that background, and I'm here and I'm advocating, for those individuals who are in the prison system, because those people they don't have people out here advocating for them. They feel like they don't have people out here advocating for them, because I was once in that position and it felt like there was nobody out here advocating. But now that I'm out here, I'm like, yo, there's people really out here doing the work. They're really doing the work. But why is it that we didn't know that? who's keeping that information from us? Or are we not working hard enough to get that information behind them walls?
Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you, Andrea, for sharing your story and sharing this perspective. I feel like ultimately, this is why we have this podcast, because I feel like our perspective, as I said before, in our bubble, is so limited that we don't really understand what's going on. We don't know the struggle. We don't know how hard it is. And you bringing such a wow, I don't think I have the word for this, but I would say it's raw. It's like telling us about this fear. It's a raw emotion. It's bringing it as you felt it. And this is necessary. This is why we need platforms for people to speak, to tell the truth, to tell what's going on, and to share these feelings, because this is really what one prevents us from changing different lives, from changing our lives. And to really is going to help us in the end to find ways to create bridges, right? And really seek the change, is to understand that there is this huge fear. So thank you. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for sharing this with us today. I think this is the most precious thing we've ever had in this podcast. Hands down. Hands down. Absolutely. And is also a great testament for the wonderful things that the organization is doing, right? I feel like you being here and you having this strength in your voice to say, hey, this is why I like being here. This is why I see meaning being here. It's really the greatest proof ever that what TGIJP is doing, it's really worth it, and it's working, and it's really moving forward people's lives. So this is really amazing. Guys, I gotta ask you the final question, even though I did not want to end this interview today, but I gotta move to that. And I feel like this is actually a good moment, because I hope people felt compelled to help you guys keep going. I hope people really understood the impact that it can make. So considering that, what would be the best ways for our listeners, people watching us, to help you guys move forward with this brilliant work?
I think one aspect of it is just kind of decarcerating your own mental state, your own mind, and just acknowledging the kind of implicit biases that are within all of us because of societal conditioning and, just living in a white, cis, heteronormative patriarchy. We're just kind of brainwashed into believing that there is this norm to kind of stick to and adhere to. And I think transness, and that's what's so powerful about having Black trans leadership, is just that, like, that unapologetic break free from these societal norms and just create. I feel like transness is creation, and it is breaking boundaries, and it is breaking systemic barriers and limitations that keeps us into this. There's this one category and it's this or that, and not opportunity. And I feel like that goes hand in hand with abolition, in the sense of abolition is creation. I feel like a lot of times when people say abolition, they kind of forget that it's just all about the tearing down and not about the possibility of building up, and that transformative justice approach of just like.
We're also currently working on a capital campaign. So if people are listening, they can go to tgijp.org and get more information about our capital campaign. We bought a building in San Francisco, which was not a small feat. And so our goal is to raise $1 million so that we can support our organization and the work that we're doing. So if people want to support us, they can also follow us on Instagram, TGI Justice Project on Instagram. And we are always looking for people to support. We do a mail night also once a month. So if people are in San Francisco, they can come join and support us, helping write letters to people who are in locked facilities as well. Any other thoughts?
I would say just strap up and be ready for war. The fight continues, and I'm dead bang when I say that. It's a serious thing, and I say that it's serious because it's a war, and just because we're out here in the free world enjoying the luxuries of the free life you know what I'm saying, the war still continues. And yeah, tap in. If you are in California, tap in, go down there to the Capitol building and advocate for somebody who's incarcerated. Seriously, advocate for somebody trying to find ways to get in contact with somebody who's incarcerated. Honestly, in the California prison. Here, there we go. See, these are messages, and I'll say that real quick because as we're speaking, or as I'm speaking, there was a pile of mail from inmates who are incarcerated that just basically fell over. And this is no lie. And I really just want to show, see, you know, this is what happens when truth is spewed. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, it's a lot of us, and it's a whole lot of us around here who can actually tap in. You know what I'm saying? These people who are incarcerated, they need to hear us. Black trans girls need to hear us. Trans girls of color, brown, they need to hear us. You know, white trans, whatever. If you're a transgender and you are incarcerated, we already being oppressed as is. You know what I mean? And when I tell you that it's rough, it's rough. And if you ain't out, join the fight. Honestly, join the fight. This is where it's at. Join the fight. That's all I can say. Thank you for that opportunity.
Oh, actually, thank you. Thank both three of you for joining this. Let's join this fight. And again, thank you, Elias. Thank you, Star, and thank you, Andrea. This was a necessary, brilliant conversation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having us.
And to everyone else listening and watching us, remember, thank you actually first. Thank you for staying for one more episode. And remember, if you enjoyed this episode, press subscribe on YouTube or in a podcast app. Share this with everyone you know. Share on social media. Go to their page. Go to their social media. Show some love in there. Comment. Share the content. This is what we need to do to spread the word and show the algorithms that this is an important conversation. And then more people can learn about the importance of the Miss Major Alexander L. Lee Black TGIJP Black Transcultural Center. Guys, again, the link to their page, as Star said, it's going to be on the description of this episode. All right. So there's no excuses to click on it. And please join this fight. Andrea is right. The fight is going on. The war is happening. We need to do something about it. We need to speak up. We need to move ourselves. And then we can only affect change if we decided to move, if we decided to change. All right. Bye. And I'll see you in the next episode.